Welcome to the Global Business Report. We now take you to Enugu State for the 14th Emeka Anyaoku lecture series, Good Governance.
To challenge and inspire the present and the upcoming generations on leadership. Special thank His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Anyaoku, for hosting this year's lecture on good governance. Your Excellency, your visionary leadership style is what emulating. All over the country, you have become a positive case study, and the youth are sincerely proud of you. As we all listen to the lecture today, I strongly believe that we will be educated and well-informed on the imperatives of good governance. Thank you all. I am Emeka for Youth Affairs International Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to especially defer to the chairman of this great occasion for the opening remarks. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our chairman is no other than accomplished administrator leader, General Ike Wajibu. If I were you, I would appreciate you with a round of applause.
Chief Emeka Anyaoku, it is with great pleasure and a deep sense of responsibility that I welcome you to this pivotal lecture on leadership governance in Nigeria. As we convene today, we stand at a critical juncture in our nation's history where the discourse on effective leadership and robust governance has never been more pertinent. Nigeria, with its rich tapestry of cultures, abundant resources, and resilient population, holds immense potential. Yet, the challenges we face in leadership and governance have often impeded our journey towards sustainable development and national cohesion. Issues such as corruption, lack of transparency, economic instability, and social unrest have most times overshadowed our collective aspirations. As highlighted in a recent analysis, the failure of governance in Nigeria is evident in the declining capacity of political leaders to recognize systemic issues and implement necessary measures to address them. However, amidst these challenges, there lies an opportunity, a call to action for transformative leadership that is visionary, accountable, inclusive. Leadership that not only addresses immediate concerns, but also strategically positions Nigeria for future prosperity and safety. This transformational leadership will never happen under the present structure of which Nigeria is governed. I want to repeat that. This transitional leadership will never happen under the present structure on which Nigeria is governed. This is why I have long been advocating for the restructuring of Nigeria to become a proper federation, allowing state autonomy and bringing governance closer to its people. This also allows access to the mineral resources and natural resources for their development. I stand for respect for the rule of law, the need for a forthright an independent judiciary, a more effective and responsive military, police, and intelligence services. I also stand for the creation of state police, local policing for our communities. Above all, a school system that allows relevant human resources development that will propel Nigerians, our youth particularly, to be innovative and to face up to the challenges of the artificial intelligence world, AI. Not the least, Nigeria must have a truly people's federal constitution made by its ethnic nationalities and interest groups. The 1999 federal constitution restrains, I repeat, restrains development and harmonious coexistence of the Nigerian peoples. The imagined New World Economic Security and Development Order, it will make this imperative for immediate action to be taken for restructuring and providing a new people's federal constitution. We must not lose the opportunity to truly free ourselves from the constitutional bondage that we find ourselves in our country today. As I pondered the immense difficulties under which my younger colleagues in the military and security services operate, considering reports of inadequate manpower, weaponry, and the lack of a free hand to deal decisively with these bandits and insurgents marauding and occupying territories in our country, I received this post in my box. And I quote, what if Boko Haram won the war? In an alternate future, the unimaginable happens. The Nigerian military collapses. The final strongholds of Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt fall. And the black flag of Boko Haram rises over the land. Nigeria is no longer a democracy. It's a caliphate. The constitution gone. The National Assembly banned. Western education banned nationwide. The girls are forbidden from going to school. Music, movies, and fashion, all declared haram. Social media is shut down. Internet access controlled by the state. Books are banned. Laughter is silenced. Expression is crushed. Every Friday, stadiums filled not with cheering football fans, but with terrified citizens. They watch as criminals are executed, hands are chopped off, and unbelievers are publicly punished. This is the new Nigeria, a nation ruled by fear. Around the globe, embassies are shut down. The African Union expels Nigeria. The United Nations imposes sanctions. Nigeria becomes the North Korea of Africa, isolated, feared, and forgotten. But on the ground, something says. Deep in the forests of the South, in the hills of the Middle Belt, in the basements of across the East and other parts of Nigeria, resistance begins to rise. Younger Nigerians form secret networks, pirate radio stations, broadcast forbidden news. All soldiers train the next generation. A new slogan spread like wildfire. Take Nigeria. Hope still lives, but is flickering, dying slowly in the shadows of oppression. And now, only one question remains. How long until the green, white, green flag flies again? This is not a prediction, it's not prophecy, but it is a warning. Because when evil wins, it's not always with thanks. Sometimes it starts with silence, unquote. This scenario, to say the least, is worrying. But we can arrest it if we dare. let me return to today's lecture, which I believe will serve as a platform for introspection, dialogue, and exchange of ideas on the ways to salvage our dear nation, Nigeria, from collapse. We expect that our respected lecturer, a colleague and friend with whom we redefined in our time the foreign policy direction of Nigeria, will delve into the multifaceted dimensions of leadership and governance, examining both historical context and the contemporary realities. We believe that this lecture will also emphasize our collective goal to unearth actionable insights and strategies that can propel Nigeria towards a trajectory of excellence and equity. In conclusion, I encourage each participant to engage wholeheartedly, challenge prevailing narratives, and contribute to the evolving discourse. It is through our shared commitment and collaborative efforts that we can envisage and actualize a Nigeria where leadership is not a position of privilege, but a mandate of service. I repeat that. Where actualizing Nigeria, where leadership is not a position of privilege, but a mandate to serve. Finally, together, we can chart a course towards a future where governance is truly of the people, by the people, and for the people. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, please, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, please, 1 minute, sir. Hello, sir. Please, 1 minute, sir. Why are you still on the podium? Yes. Please, I'm aware some photographers wanted to capture you on this, but because of my presence, so I'm giving them space to get you down. No, just take your pose, sir. They want to take a shot with you, but I was actually an obstacle to their business. When you are done, you let. We'll take the floor to speak to us in his remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Your Excellency, the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, GCON, the Chairman of this occasion, Senator Ike Nwachukwu, thank you and welcome to Enugu. The keynote speaker, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the former Minister of Information, Ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that are here present, the Deputy Speaker and members of Enugu State House of Assembly that are here, members of the Enugu State, heads of security, chairmen of various local governments that are here present, our party chieftains, heads of vaults and tertiary institutions, captains of industries that are here, distinguished women, men of the press, ladies, family honored to be the chief host of the Chief Emeka Anyaoku lecture series of good governance. When I received a correspondence from the organizers seeking my consent to be chief host of this event, I didn't have to think long and hard before I gave a response The response couldn't possibly be anything other than a resounding yes. Chief Emeka Anyaoku is an inspirational figure that I hold in very high esteem. He is, I dare say, one of our best gifts to the world. In addition to my immense respect for Chief Emeka Anyaoku, good governance is a subject I've always found quite fascinating. I welcome you all to Enugu, a city steeped in rich history that goes far back as Nigeria's pre-amalgamation. I am particularly delighted to welcome the chairman of the occasion, Senator Ike, and the keynote speaker, the very erudite Professor Ibrahim Gambari. Few cities stand as more fitting venue for an event such as this, as does Enugu. Apart from the fact that many milestones in Nigeria's history had occurred here, Enugu was home to several political figures that were exemplar of good leadership. Good governance, or lack of it, is often the fine margins between an ascendant state and one on a downward trajectory. So we cannot have enough of forums and discussions devoted to good governance. I commend the board of the Youth Affairs International Foundation for consistently holding a mirror to the society. In 14 years, it has successfully created a platform where ideas are born, inconvenient truths are told, and the seeds of patriotism sufficiently watered. But as is often the case, the challenge is moving beyond the realm of ideas into practicality. Good intentions alone do not translate to good leadership. Good leadership proceeds from the understanding that the people should be the centerpiece of state policies and projects. Indeed, good leadership is both a political and economic imperative. The reasons are not hard to deduce. With over 200 million population and a median age of 18, Nigeria has a significant youth bulge. This is both potential strength and possibly an Achilles heel. In a world where many developed nations contend with aging populations, our youthful population may be a unique demographic advantage, but it could still prove to be a social tinderbox if not carefully harnessed. When we invest in the youth, we are invariably investing in securing not just their future, but our future too. Indeed, when our actions and policies banish anxieties about the future in our youth, we make them less prone to the first allure of criminality. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I do not intend to take the place or the role of the keynote speaker. This role would be creditably discharged by Professor Ibrahim Gambari. Like many gathered here, I'm keenly looking forward to a riveting and incisive discourse. I congratulate all the honorees for their well-deserved recognition. I implore everyone to leave here with a resolve to work towards building an inclusive society where the door is not shut against anyone. God bless Enugu State. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
The lines we are not going to take much of that risk. Making progress. And as the sage said, the coast is fully clear. This is the moment we're waiting for. With His Excellency having swept the floor and paved the way, the next we can do is to usher in the keynote speaker for today's event. He is no other person than Professor Ibrahim Gambari, CFR. We all know him. We grew up with his record, an accomplished diplomat, an accomplished legislator, accomplished politician, businessman. One man that any aspect you look at him, he has an exemplary record and something good to say. Today, it is not a surprise that this great event, and for this great event, he has been selected to make the keynote speech. Sir, you're most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I urge you to join me. Let's celebrate this fine gentleman. Let's appreciate him as he walks to the podium. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Making welcome our keynote speaker for today, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, CFR. Thank you. The lines were quite poetic. The lines we are not going to take much of that place. Making progress. And as the sage said, the coast is fully clear. This is the moment we're waiting for. With His Excellency having swept the floor and paved the way, the next we can do is to usher in the keynote speaker for today's event. He is no other person than Gambari, CFR. We grew up with his record, an accomplished diplomat, an accomplished legislator, accomplished politician. Selected to make the keynote speech. Sir, you're most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I urge you to join me. Let's celebrate this fine gentleman. Let's appreciate him as he walks to the podium. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Making welcome keynote speaker for today, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, CFR. Can we have another round of applause as he walks to the stage? Welcome to Enugu State. Welcome, sir. I'd like to trust. Okay. Okay.
Good morning. Because it's still morning. Do I hear a response? Good morning. It is not often that I find myself feeling overwhelmed by an occasion, but I have to confess up front that I'm filled with positive emotions today to be in your presence at this August gathering holding in the historic city of Enugu. There are so many thoughts racing through my mind as I speak. There's, of course, to start with, the heartwarming and effusive hospitality that has been extended to me since my arrival in the coast city, for which many thanks to His Excellency Dr. Peter Mba, the pace-setting, game-changing governor of Enugu State, and our chief host. Your Excellency Dalu. There's also the immense joy of reunion with my many old friends, associates, and colleagues who have turned out to participate in this 14th annual lecture. Among this distinguished category of people, kindly allow me to single out for appreciation the chairman of this lecture, the highly esteemed, and I might add, ageless General Ike Senda Nwachukwu. Officer, administrator, gentlemen, Nigerians par excellence, Mr. Chairman, my friend and brother, I salute you. The overflow of emotional appeal are particularly centered on the titan of a person we are gathered here today to celebrate through the lecture series instituted in his name. The incomparable Chief Emeka Anyaoku, GCON, first-class administrator, consummate diplomat, former federal minister, the third Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations, and the first African elected to that office. A worthy ambassador of the black race, celebrated Pan-Africanist, fondly remembered for his work in continental liberation, fighter for national unity and justice, elder statesman, grounded community leader, a man of character, a man of courage, and an unimpeachable integrity. Please, another round of applause for him. It's also a very delightful coincidence that at this event, we have 3 former Nigerian foreign ministers in attendance. The first and the third, General Ike Nwachukwu. In order of seniority, but even though I say in order of seniority, General Ike Nwachukwu, as foreign minister, became my boss because I was his minister, I was his ambassador to the United Nations, actually twice. He was my boss twice, so I salute you. Now, Chief Nwodo, former Minister of Information, President General of Ohanese Worldwide. Actually, I'll never forget him for a special reason, which I will share with you today. When there was a ceremony to mark the return to civilian rule after many years of military rule in Nigeria, he thought that I should be invited to deliver the unprecedented keynote address to usher in the democratic dispensation in 1999. Thank you for that great honor. Yeah, Your Excellencies, the topics that have been selected as the recurrent theme for the annual lecture series, namely on the imperative of good governance in Nigeria, which have taken the liberty to amend to include a global comparative perspective, couldn't be more fitting and timely. It's fitting because it is a subject to which Chief Anyaoku devoted the greater part of his career and his public service and community engagement after he retired formally from office. It is timely because around the world, amid what scholars have described as a situation of polycrisis, that is the intersection of multiple crises all taking place at the same time, we are living witnesses to unprecedented governance and leadership challenges that seem to presage the end of an epoch in world affairs. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the crisis of governance and leadership playing out around the world has been a source of intense and multiple discussions, from gatherings of international political and business leaders to meetings of diplomats, scholars, and civil society leaders. The crisis has been the one topic that has, for various reasons, commanded attention both nationally, regionally, and globally. Now, I decided that I would add a global perspective because sometimes we in Nigeria, we think we're the world. We're not. We're special, but we're not the world. And it is in the context of the concentric circles of foreign policy that I'm credited to have expanded during the time that I was foreign minister, briefly, only 18 months. Nigeria is at the epicenter of that circle of interests and concerns, but immediately to be followed by our neighboring countries, because our prosperity, our security, and even our status in the world is related to our relations with our immediate neighbors. Then the West African sub-region, then the African continent and the world. But it's interesting that that concentric circle of interest and policy perspective and action is now being kind of turned on its head. And many times what is happening in the world affects what's happening in our continent, Africa, affects what's happening in West Africa, and affects us. In any case, as three of us in this audience who are foreign ministers of Nigeria, we have to think nationally, regionally, continentally, and globally. And it's in that context that whereas Anyaoku was the first African to become World Secretary General of the UN, I had the privilege also working with two Secretary Generals of the United Nations who are also the first to be Secretary Generals of the United Nations. The first was Brutus Ghali from Egypt, in the African continent. The second, from the so-called Sub-Saharan Africa, was Kofi Annan. And between them, they were both the most intellectual as well as the most diplomatically astute Secretary Generals the world or the organization has ever seen. And it is in their time and under their watch that they produced two seminal, in fact, more than two, seminal reports. The first was by Brutus Ghali, An Agenda for Peace, in which he argued that there can be no development without peace. And therefore, the world to concentrate on how to prevent wars, failing to prevent wars, to keep the peace and build the peace, and preventive diplomacy. But he also then followed that with another report, which is relevant to our discussion today, An Agenda for Development, in which he argued that there be no durable peace without sustainable development. And it was Kofi Annan, in his own agenda, which he called a larger freedom, which he argued there will be neither durable peace nor sustainable development without democracy, good government, and the pursuit of human rights. So, peace, development, democracy, good governance are the nexus which applies globally. Now, for various reasons, the crisis that we are facing today in the world is one of security, yes, for sure, but crisis of governance and crisis of leadership. Particularly even in the so-called mature democracies, or what is often called the global north. There has been disagreements because many things are happening there that you will have thought this is not what we expect from the United Kingdom, the United States, from France, from Germany, and all of them. Because they are not supposed, they are the ones that are the guardians of democracy, of good governance. They are the ones who dictate to us what governance should be about. But it's like when the United States is going to have election, maybe we should send observer missions from Nigeria and the global south. Because some of the things that have been happening recently, from open disagreement over election results, the violent contestation of polling outcomes, the collapse of electoral integrity, to the erosion of judicial independence, the chaotic eruptions in legislative houses and riotous street protests underwritten by alien, rated, and irate youth. The world has been exposed to scenes of political instability and decline that was once thought to be the exclusive preserved for the countries of the global south, and the typical characteristics of generalized underdevelopment. These developments have come against a backdrop of the decline in party politics, the fragmentation of political society, and deep social cleavages. The collapse of the post-1945 elite consensus even in the West, and intensified voter apathy as the state-society social contract constructed after the Second World War slided into atrophy, egregious abuse of power and office by public servants and elected officials, the disproportionate influence of money, including criminal funds, in politics. Now, there are so many reasons that has been alluded for this. I won't go into details, but I want to mention that in the face of the crisis of governance and leadership that have become undeniable in the global south, scholars have competed among themselves to find the best characterization of what was unfolding. Some spoke about democratic regression, others prefer to talk about democratic decline, while others suggested that it was a case of backsliding or even a recession. Usually you talk about recession with regard to the economy, but then people are beginning to talk about recession in democratic governance. Whatever characteristics they opted for, there's unanimity among them that the governance center is no longer holding in the way in which it was expected. Arguments are rife as to what has led to this crisis, especially soon after the celebration of the triumph of the liberal order and the end of history, following the collapse of the then Soviet Union and the dissolution of its ideological bloc. Whatever the explanation, the roots of the crisis of governance beclouding the countries of the global north, two things are clear. The first is that the crisis has also dovetailed with a moment in world history when the post-1945 global order, established under Western hegemony generally, and the U.S. dominance in particular, is giving way to a multipolar world in which the re-emergence of China, India, Russia are key players, along a slew of assertive middle powers like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, and so on. A new world order seems to be in the making at a time when political systems are also in need of an urgent and radical remake. It is a season of unpredictability, a season of instability, a season of insecurity in many polities and the politics among nations. The second aspect of the crisis that stands out clearly is the fact that it has been refracted beyond the global north into the countries of the global south in varying degrees. So the disease is spreading, this time from the global north, so-called advanced democracy, into the global south. The implication is that the celebrated third wave of global democratization, which when it was propounded also gave the impression of the end of history, an exonerable march towards the world towards liberal democracy as the only viable and sustainable form of administering public affairs, that did not endure as much as was expected. It was a scholar, Francis Fukuyama, who wrote a book, The End of History, in which he claimed that with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the ideological bloc, the Cold War was over, the West has won, and that's the end of history. And I recall at that time that even as a scholar from the global south, I said any talk of end of history is the beginning of nonsense. There cannot be an end of history as long as there are forces of change being challenged by the forces of status quo. The contestation between the haves and the have-nots, between the rich and the poor, between the privileged and the underprivileged will continue to make history a continuum. So coming to Africa, that period of high expectation that democracy is come here to stay witnessed investment in institutional reforms that came under the broad rubric of good governance programs supported by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the various bilateral donor agencies with emphasis on the promotion of transparency, accountability, media freedom, judicial independence, rule of law, and so on. At the same time, a political conditionality was applied by donors through which governance reforms, including the abandonment of political monopoly and encouragement of electoral pluralism, were made prerequisites for continued development assistance. The combination of internal and external factors at play led to the return by most African countries to competitive politics. So that, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, here in the 1999 in our own country, we feel that there's a rebirth of multi-party activity and a raft of constitutional reform processes that entailed, among others, the widespread adoption of the limitation of time of office for elected officials, especially president. But we soon learned that those high expectations are not necessarily going to remain fulfilled unless we work hard. In our own country, we thought with the high expectation of the return to democracy in 1991, the thought of third terms of a president extending his term beyond the Constitution would not be something that would even be entertained, even for a short period. So the argument I'm making is that we thought the 1990s was the period of a second liberation. The first liberation was liberation from colonial rule and domination, that the second liberation from one-party states and dictatorship, military rule was over. But now it seems like a kind of regression may be creeping. In our own region, West Africa, we have at least 3 military rulers in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Guinea may even be working in that direction. I was privileged to have been sent to Senegal by ECOWAS to go and to lead a presidential election observation mission. And I took that job seriously because I reflected that imagine if Senegal has gone the way of Burkina Faso, of Mali, of Niger, there will have been a setback towards the kind of protocols that the African Union and the ECOWAS have put in place, that there will be no acceptance of change of government other than by constitutional means. Thank God, the Senegalese peoples will prevail. And we have a young president elected who's younger than my first son. So I'm really actually an old man. I have to remind myself constantly when the president is much younger than your first son. But I make the point that if it had gone the other way, then there will be a clear division between the Francophone and the Anglophone. It will be set back to democracy, and it will be disappointment for the youth who have invested a lot in the coming to power of the current president of Senegal. But I also want to make the point from there that, you see, it didn't come by accident. It's the people of Senegal have spoken, you know, because there's an elite consensus that they will not accept any president that tries to prolong their stay beyond the Constitution. Yeah. When the first the Senghor ended, and you had Amadou Diop came, he tried to change the Constitution, they rose and prevented it. When Wad came and tried to change the Constitution, they rose and challenged and defeated. And when Macky Sall tried to change the constitution to prolong the stay in office, they also wrote. So the difference is that the Senegalese were acting as Senegalese with an elite consensus that they will not accept change other than by democratic means. And their institutions of electoral process were solid. I watched from beginning to Senegal is a smaller country than Nigeria, but they also have diversity. And they manage that diversity to start of that to an elite consensus, which we have to work harder to do even in our own country. Because they stood as one, we have chosen democracy, we are not going to permit anybody to thwart it. And they love their country dearly. We may disagree internally. So we have to ask our question ourselves, as Nigerians, do we love our country? Two, do we have a consensus that we will not accept change of government other than by constitutional means? Because anytime we have challenges, there's a tendency on the part of some of our let's go to the military. You know, when there's problem, we expect others to solve it except ourselves. So that kind of responsibility for the future of our country is imperative. And as His Excellency the Governor mentioned, the median age in Nigeria is 18. Now, what is even more frightening is that our population, by UN estimate, please listen to this carefully, by 2050, Nigeria, if we manage to keep ourselves together, and I hope we shall, because the future is better together than to be apart, Nigeria will be the third most populous country in the world. We're already the most populous in Africa, but in the world. Next, first to India, second China, and third Nigeria. I was in Singapore. I'd like to share with you when there was a debate in their parliament that their population is going to increase by 200,000 people. An uproar. How can we deal with this 200,000? Where would they live? What would they eat? Power, schools, hospitals. And yet, in less than 25 years, Nigeria is the third most populous country in the world. So governance is even going to be more critical. Where will the people live? Food security, human security, hospitals, schools, and all of that. And those is what should be preoccupying our leadership and our followership rather than who is decamping from one political party to another and for what reason. So, as I come towards the conclusion of my lecture, the things that should preoccupy the leadership and the elite of this country really are very different from what they seem to be preoccupying them. So, coming now to the political reforms that are needed. His Excellency Chief Anyaoku, as Congress Secretary General, played a frontline role in pushing for the enabling environment, an investment that will lead to electoral integrity among the other components of good governance. Remarkably, and what was a global first, the African Union, itself a product of the transition of the 1990s, adopted a charter against unconstitutional change of government. In other words, they said if a country, a member state, changes the government other than constitution, they are suspended from the African Union. The same seems to exist in ECOWAS. And in fact, the African Union went to establish an African peer review mechanism whose eminent persons group I had the honor of chairing at one point, which committed itself to an agenda 2063 for Africa, at peace with itself, with gun silence, and moving towards continental renaissance. Now, coming back home very quickly, it was like other countries in Africa, it was so obvious that while good governance was at best key to the alternation of power that took place through the ballot box, it didn't necessarily contribute to the diversification of the socio-economic policy direction in most African countries, including our own. In fact, what emerged is that regardless of party, regardless of leader, regardless of government voted into power, No matter the campaign promises that were made, policy remains essentially the same, derived from the same unchanging orthodox prescription of the international financial institutions that continue to dominate the framework and the context of fiscal, monetary, and social measures based on their neoliberal vision of the world. The consequence was power alternation failed to deliver substantive policy shifts and simply came across as an elite game of musical chairs in which, in French, plus ça change, plus cela même chose. The more things change, the more they seem to remain the same. Not surprisingly, the voting citizenry became increasingly apathetic and cynical about governance under elected politicians. Furthermore, with the passage of time, even with the early gains of 1990s, in electoral integrity, judicial independence, and constitutionalism began in the course of the new millennium to be eroded. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the overall picture I've painted on the trajectory of contemporary African governance has been played out in full measure in our own country, Nigeria. The transition to the Fourth Republic in 1999 marked a return to elected civilian government. Since then, we have successfully sustained elected administration for just over a quarter of a century. That's a plus, and it's a record worth noting, marking the longest unbroken spell of elected government in the country since independence in 1960. That period has produced civilian-to-civilian succession, the alternation of power between the ruling and opposition parties, and the occasional display of high statesmanship through, for example, a losing candidate gallantly congratulating the winner, if only for the sake of peace and stability of the nation. So, there are good reasons to celebrate the continued vibrancy of the Nigerian media and civil society as key monitors and drivers of good governance through the diverse interventions they make, however unevenly and episodically. Although the system of checks and balances emphasized in the 1999 Constitution may not be functioning as effectively as it is emphasized, there has been no shortage of actors and institutions operating in various centers of power and influence across the country to fill the gap, accountability gap from time to time. I'm also note that beyond the federal level, we have witnessed stellar performance at the state level, including especially our very own governor of Enugu State. Please give him another round of applause. Yes. And he and a few others are providing a glimpse of what a functioning government can answer to the citizens. But there should not be an exception that proves the rule. The rule should be precisely that good governance is happening at every level and in every state of the Federation. However, few will doubt that much more has been expected by Nigerians for the experience of elected government today. Quite apart from the structural problems of poverty, inequality, and unemployment that are, as earlier noted, common to all African countries and are present in abundance in Nigeria, there are such challenges as multifaceted insecurity at the center of which are various long-running insurgencies, a breakdown of trust in political leaders and institutions, and absence of a least consensus, even on some of the most basic issues of national development. I know that